Welcome to today's webinar Wednesday by the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. If you are not familiar with the foundation, we were founded in 2008 after the tragic death of Denise Amber Lee, who, due to inefficiencies in the 911 center, she was abducted and then subsequently lost her life. From there, her husband Nathan started the foundation, trying to find ways to support 911 so something like that wouldn't happen again. As always, you can visit our website at deniseamberlee.org to learn more about the story and everything we offer. But this is such a fantastic topic today with Andrea, so I want to make sure I don't take too much time away, so that way we can hear all the things from her. But for anyone who doesn't know as well, I am Halcyon Frank, Director of Training and Development with the Foundation. And I am going to now hand it over to Andrea to take it away to tell us a little bit about ourselves and dive right in. Feel free to jump in the chat if you're watching this live. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you've struggled with imposter syndrome, any other thoughts or questions you might have, but take it away, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Halcyon. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I'm excited for this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. Like Halcyon said, please make sure you type in the chat. Even let's just start by saying hello, where you're viewing from. Just a shout out and say hi. I would love to interact with you all in the chat. Virtual webinars can be a little weird sometimes. And we want to make sure that we are engaging. Hi, Christine, and everyone who's joining. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm really excited today to talk to you guys and spend this next hour discussing all the ways that you can overcome this thing that we call imposter syndrome. But first, I would love to give you a peek at a day in my life. Let's see.
Hey, by the way, your work is amazing. You're incredibly talented, and I can tell how much hard work you put into what you do. I'm sorry, what is she saying? Here we go again. She's trying to say you're average, but she's actually not going to say that because she doesn't want to hurt your feelings. And even if she did mean it, she doesn't know we're a fraud. I mean, how could we be amazing? Look at all these other people who are actually doing an amazing job. So what she's really trying to say is you could do better. Right. That makes more sense. For a second I thought, never mind. No, what did you think? I don't know, I thought maybe she was saying we're actually good at what we do. That was a good one. Oh my god, gotcha. I thought you were serious for a second. I did not think you could be that. Hey, self-esteem, you gotta come hear this.
Sorry if anyone feels like I went right into your head and got this video. This is exactly the dialogue that I go through all the time. And I'd love to hear from you guys if anyone else goes through this internal dialogue. Whenever somebody compliments your work or suggests that you would be good for a new opportunity. Or how about when your boss tells you that you did a good job? Literally this morning, I was scrolling through my email and I got an email from someone telling me that I did a really great job on this blog that I wrote. And I immediately thought, that was not my greatest work. She's just being nice. I wrote that in such a rush because for some reason, I just cannot accept a compliment without qualifying it with an excuse or a justification of some sort. But maybe you experience it a little differently. Maybe you overwork yourself because you fear failure, or that fear makes you avoid new challenges or opportunities altogether. Anybody? Nicole, I promise I'm not targeting you. See, all of these things are not just habits or things that you have yourself. The behaviors that I described are signs and symptoms and coping mechanisms that relate to a phenomenon called imposter syndrome. And today we're going to talk about it. We're going to unmask all of those behaviors that are causing self-doubt and fear of failure and perfectionism and anxiety and anything else that is holding you back from your success. I really want us to get into that conversation today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, but really quick, I want to go over a few housekeeping things for our session. Like I said, light the chat up. I will try to interact with you guys, but make sure you're interacting with each other. We learn from sharing, we learn from hearing, and that's how we grow. Also, there's going to be some interactive portions of this session that you can participate in. As you can see, a little QR code here, that's for my LinkedIn, but there will be a couple other screens with a QR code where we're going to do a poll together, kind of like a little quiz. And I want to make sure that you guys are able to interact with that. So it'll just ask you to scan the QR code and join the quiz. So the more interaction, the better. And thank you all for being here. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Andrea King-Smith, and I am trying to escape imposter syndrome. I grew up in 911, and I knew from the very first phone call that I took that I was called to this field. I started when I was 19 years old. I spent a number of years, 13 and a few months to be exact, in the 911 center. I served at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department in their communications bureau in the community where my family and I still live today. I am very active with NINA and APCO. I'm actually your co-chair for the NINA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Special Committee. I am a champion for change. I'm an ambassador for all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I am doing the work to help transform our industry. I believe that perfection is God's business, like Michael J. Fox once said, because we are all human. And I tell myself all the time as I try to recover from my own perfectionism. But let me go back to when I was in 911. I knew from the moment that I walked in the door that I wasn't going to stay at the console. I wanted to promote. I wanted to go into leadership. And so somewhere around the 7-year mark, I decided I was going to take the test to promote to supervisor. I took the test a couple of times, and on that second try, I placed number 1 on the list. And I knew it would just be a matter of time before I was promoted once my list was certified. And in the meantime, I was asked to move into the role of an acting supervisor. Now, pausing here for a second, has anyone fallen into that trap where you get all of the responsibility and a fraction of, or none of the pay? Anyone done that acting supervisor trap? I see Christy has. But I took the role, I took the acting supervisor role, and I did that for several months until I was promoted in place to a supervisor. I can tell you that of the 4 years I spent in leadership at my agency, the 6 months I spent as an acting supervisor were the hardest. And it wasn't for the reasons that you would think, like learning a brand new job. It wasn't that at all, actually. It was the self-doubt that consumed me and the crippling perfectionism and fear of making a mistake. It was a thought that I was only given this role because I was on the promotion list and it was convenient for the agency, and the feeling that all of the dispatchers and call takers knew that I wasn't a real supervisor and they weren't going to respect me. Now, did that happen? Not really. But in my mind, that's what could happen. And because I felt like that's what could happen, I experienced debilitating stress and anxiety. Anyone that can relate, make sure just throw your hand up in the chat. I believe now that if I had just replaced one of those negative thoughts with a positive affirmation, if I had just said to myself, you earned this, you were gonna be a supervisor one day, you came out number 1 on that list. If I had just said any of those things to myself, I would have had an easier transition into leadership. But I didn't, because I didn't know what imposter syndrome was. So I want to make sure that when you leave today, you can put a name to what you've been experiencing, if you've experienced any of the similar things that I did. And beyond that, I want you to know that you can remove that mask of self-doubt, and you can learn to work through your feelings of imposter syndrome and thrive in spite of them. That's what I want you guys to learn today. So going back into a little bit of my background, I like to include this slide because it has some really pivotal moments in my life. And behind each picture was a series of change that I was scared of, a series of newness that my mind told me I wasn't ready for or I wasn't qualified for. From, my picture down here at the very bottom, where I was a brand new baby dispatcher graduating from the Dispatch Academy with my dad there to recognize me. And how scared I was going into this new field, to where I was here and I was pretty, solid in my role as a dispatcher and doing really good, but knew I wanted to do more and was scared to step out on that faith and do more. To, when I became a supervisor here and I had just gone through that 6 months of just terrible life, because I didn't know how to push past those feelings. Getting married and having a family, all of these things were life changes where my imposter syndrome wreaked havoc in my life. And I didn't understand what it was. And I thought that I was the only one experiencing this. So again, I want you to know that if you are experiencing these things, you're not alone. Many people experience these things. But if you don't believe me, let's take a look at what some people are saying about their experiences with imposter syndrome and see if you can relate. So here's some quotes that real people have made about imposter syndrome. I want you to look at them and think about one that sounds like you could have written it yourself. And if anyone wants to share which one is theirs, please throw it in the chat. I'll tell you which one is mine. It's the one down on the bottom right where it says, there are days when I walk into a room full of people and I feel like, what am I doing here? And today it wasn't even a physical room full of people. It was a virtual room full of people where I got up and logged in and said, oh my gosh, I'm about to do this. What am I doing? This class that I have taught so many times, I still get that voice in my head sometimes that's like, are you sure you're qualified for this? And I used to think that I was alone in that. But as you can see, a lot of people experience this as well. Now let's take a look at who said these things, and I think you might be a little bit surprised. So as you can see, some of the most talented and impressive and accomplished, well-known people experience the same things that you and I do when it comes to embracing success. I mean, take a look at this list. You've got an EGOT award-winning actress, one of the most educated first ladies in history. You've got Emma Watson, Tom Hanks, Maya Angelou. This is an impressive list. And the fact is, imposter syndrome has always plagued people, men and women, and it still does to this day. People respond to it differently. We call that coping mechanisms, and we'll go over some of those today. But I want you to know that you're not alone. You don't have to suffer alone. And there are ways to push through those feelings of imposter syndrome and project confidence instead. Okay, so what are we going to learn today? This is a long answer. These are our objectives. But in short, we're going to learn to say, yes, yes, I can do that. Yes, I earned that. Yes, I'm a badass. I want you to learn to push past those thoughts by saying yes instead of no to yourself. Now, a few disclaimers. I'm not a motivational speaker. My goal is to educate and affirm. And I also want to make sure that I credit and direct you to the research that this course was derived from. Because you see, I don't consider myself an expert on imposter syndrome. I learned the term from my therapist, shout out to therapy, who assigned me homework researching imposter syndrome and the effects that it could be having on my life. And let me tell you, it was wreaking havoc in my life. And that's how I discovered Dr. Valerie Young in her book, The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. It's my book recommendation of the day. It's a great book for all people to read if you're experiencing anything like this. And I started to unearth how imposter syndrome was affecting my life. So this session was born out of my desire for healing. And if there's anyone else here seeking that similar healing, I am glad that you're here and I hope this helps. And I will also work hard to motivate you, but I refer you back to disclaimer number 1. So here's our objectives. We're going to understand the definition of imposter syndrome and contributing factors to its existence. We'll talk about the ways that people have learned to unconsciously manage their feelings of imposter syndrome. We'll understand the different competence types as they relate to imposter syndrome and identify where you align. And now competence types are what Dr. Young has defined as different ways that people experience imposter syndrome. And we'll talk about common consequences of success and how to replace those with positive affirmations of success instead. Jessica says, apparently Tom Hanks and I should be besties. Halcyon, I remind myself that no one out here knows what they're doing either. Yes, that is a good thing to remind yourself of. So I saw this quote by Adam Grant, and it says, imposter syndrome is a paradox. Others believe in you. You don't believe in yourself, yet you believe yourself instead of them. I'm like, that is so interesting. It's an absurd contradiction, a paradox, right? If you doubt yourself, shouldn't you also doubt your judgment of yourself? Because when multiple people believe in you, it might be time to believe them. And when I read this, I'm like, God, it makes so much sense. Like, what am I doing? People tell me all the time that they believe in me. People tell me that they think I'm great at things. They tell me that they love my energy. They love my spirit when I'm on stage talking. And I say, thank you. And in my mind, I immediately go to, oh, they're just being nice. They don't know what they're talking about. So I don't believe in myself, but I believe me over what these people are telling me. It doesn't make sense. So it's such an interesting way to look at imposter syndrome. And when it starts to make sense like that, maybe you can start to navigate towards the positive instead. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? Where did it come from? What does it mean? Dr. Young defines it as an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. It's commonly accompanied by feelings of fear, self-doubt, and inadequacy. She says essentially it's a feeling of phoniness that leaves individuals feeling like they're not worthy of their accomplishments and that they will eventually be exposed as a fraud. That's a really long definition, but there's two key things that you need to remember when it comes to imposter syndrome. One, it's a psychological phenomenon. It's all in your head. It's not real. It's really just in your head. And we know that because it happens despite number two, which is evidence of your accomplishments. You clearly earned whatever it is that the opportunity that you're taking, but your head tells you that you didn't. So that's how imposter syndrome really impacts you. You got to remember that it's in your head and it exists despite the evidence of your accomplishments. Now, while we're at the beginning, let's talk about some myths and facts about imposter syndrome. And this is the part where you're going to pull out your cell phone and scan the QR code to join the quiz. Throw your name in there, and when we have a few people on there, we will launch the quiz. Hopefully everyone can get in. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Jenna, Jen, Christy, welcome. Hi, Nicole, Smiley, Shannon, Aaron, Sherry. Welcome. Let's see if we can get a few more people in here. Anjali, I'm wondering if this is the Anjali that I know. Let me know if you are. And welcome. Okay, so we're gonna jump into the quiz while people are still joining. You'll answer your questions on your phone. All right, so number one, imposter syndrome is a sign of weakness. Do we think that's a fact or a myth? Lock in your answer on the phone and then we'll see what everyone chose. Imposter syndrome is a sign of weakness. All right, the results are in. 94% of you said that that's a myth and 6% of you said that that is a fact. The answer is a myth. And so for my 6%, we're gonna change your minds by the end of this presentation. The fact is, imposter syndrome is not a sign of weakness or incompetence. It's a common experience that many successful people have faced, including high achieving professionals, celebrities like we saw on that last slide. In fact, it can be a sign of high standards and a desire for excellence. So sometimes when I'm really experienced my imposter syndrome and I'm really going down this rabbit hole of perfectionism, I say, you know what, I just have high standards and a desire for excellence. And it sometimes makes me feel better, but it's not healthy. So don't do that. All right, let's go to the next question. You can overcome imposter syndrome completely. Do we think that's a fact or a myth? You can overcome imposter syndrome completely. Lock in your answers. There's 6 seconds left. All right, the results are in. Ooh, I love a mixed bag, and this is a really mixed one. The answer is it's a myth. While it's possible to manage and reduce the effects of imposter syndrome, it may never completely go away. it's a common experience that can resurface at different stages of life and in response to new challenges. But recognizing and addressing the imposter syndrome can help you build confidence and resilience to better cope with these feelings. I think when I was telling you guys about me, I left out a part. That part was a huge part. It's when I left the 911 center. So I, in 2021, left the PSAP and I joined the dark side, as they called it. I moved to the company that I now work at. It's called Carbine, and I am a senior strategic customer success manager and engagement lead. And it was the scariest decision that I ever made. It was completely insane for me to think that I was just going to leave my good government job and jump to the private sector. But I did it, right? And as though it was the scariest thing I've ever done, it was also the best decision I could have made for myself. And I love what I do. So when I was in the 911 center and those 6 months went by when I was an acting supervisor and I got promoted, my imposter syndrome didn't go away at month 7. And it didn't go away at year 2 when I was off probation as a supervisor. And it didn't go away at year 4 when I was one of the senior supervisors. I had better management skills of it. I was able to push through it, thrive in spite of it, keep it at bay, but it wasn't fully gone. But then in 2021, as I just told you guys, I did the thing and jumped to a new job. And what came right along with me was my imposter syndrome. And it came rearing its ugly head. And for the first 6 to 9 months of my new job, I struggled. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the session, but it doesn't always go away. All right, we have one more question and we'll be done with our quiz. So imposter syndrome only affects women. Now, men, please don't get this question wrong. But lock in your answers. Fact or myth, imposter syndrome only affects women. 3 seconds left. We were so close, y'all. So the answer is that is a myth. The fact is, imposter syndrome can affect individuals of any gender. And although it's often associated with women, men can and do experience imposter syndrome as well. Now, research suggests that men may be less likely to talk about their feelings of inadequacy, and they may feel pressured to appear confident, which makes it harder to recognize and address imposter syndrome. But it's still there for a lot of men as well. It can be just as impactful for men as it is for women. Thank you for playing along, Smiley. Tell me who you are, because I'm going to get with you after this and I have a little sticker pack to send you. So let me know who you are, or let Halcyon know. And okay, Susie, hi. We'll get your information and I'll send something in the mail for you. Thank you guys for playing. Let's get back to our session. Okay, so let's briefly talk about the women who, through their own quest for answers and healing, discovered what we call imposter syndrome. So the concept of imposter syndrome was first identified in the 70s. It was by these 2 psychologists, Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. Back then, they called it an imposter phenomenon. And they initially observed imposter syndrome in their high-achieving peers who were women who believed that their success was due to luck or timing or the ability to deceive others or all kinds of other external factors other than their own abilities. So they wanted to study these women. They studied 150 high-achieving women, and they published their findings in a paper titled The Imposter Phenomenon in High-Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. That was published in 1978. It's a great paper. Kind of going back to our last question, imposter syndrome is often associated with women. As you can see in the 70s when these doctors discovered it, they only surveyed women. But what they recognized was when they talked to their male peers, they never said it was because of luck that they were as high achieving as they were. And so they wanted to figure out what was causing that. And that's why they went into their research. Like I said, it's a really impressive paper. I'm happy to share it with anyone who would like a copy of it. But we're really grateful to Clance and Imes for their work in discovering imposter syndrome. And we're grateful for other experts like Dr. Young, who this class is developed from, or Professor Joan Harvey, Professor Kevin Coakley. There's a number of authors like Lisa Orbe Austin who have continued to study the causes and effects of imposter syndrome through today, because that's how we're learning more methods for thriving in spite of it. So let's talk about some more stats. It's estimated that up to 70% of people experience imposter syndrome in their lifetime. That's a staggering number of people. And if you look at the number of millennials who experience, it's even higher. Yet, imposter syndrome, this is surprising to me, is not a diagnosable mental health disorder. So if so many people are experiencing this phenomenon, and this is something for you guys to throw your ideas in the chat, if so many people are experiencing it and it's not a diagnosable mental health disorder, how are people handling it? What are people doing? What are you doing? Let's see some ideas in the chat. Anyone? How are you managing your imposter syndrome? I'll tell you something that I do. I work excessively hard to hope that if I make any mistakes, it's overcompensated for by me working very, very hard. Jenna says, taking this class, thank you. I don't manage mine well. Fake it till you make it. Desperately treading water and hoping I don't drown. Jessica, that is a lot of us. That is a lot of us. Karen says affirmations, which is great. That is actually the healthy way to deal with it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Sometimes I avoid new challenges for fear of failing. Yes. Taking lots of training, trying to push it aside and ignore it, but it leaves a strange feeling. All of these things are what people are doing. And honestly, they can all be summed up to, we are just unconsciously managing it. We're coping. We're just trying to get through it. We're just trying to fake it till we make it, or push it aside and hope that no one notices what is so loud going on in our heads. And the things that we turn to in order to push past it have likely become so normal that you don't even realize that it's a problem. So let's go over some of the most common coping mechanisms that we see today. Show up to work every day, head down. That's something that people do as well. That falls into that avoidance category that we're going to talk about here in a second, Erin. Someone said, thank those that voice confidence in you, even when you can't see it. That is something that you can do that is really, really helpful. So some of these unconscious coping mechanisms that we turn to help us push past the feelings of imposter syndrome. You have things like overworking, avoidance, discounting, perfectionism, my personal favorite, and seeking validation. So let's talk about overworking. Some people cope with imposter syndrome by working excessively hard and striving for perfection. While this can be a productive coping mechanism because you get a lot done, it can also lead to burnout and stress and a lot of other negative consequences. And let me tell you, if you've ever heard the phrase that stress can kill you, stress can literally kill you. Stress and cortisol does something to your body that is so unhealthy and affects you in so many more ways than what you would anticipate. So overworking leads to very unhealthy things happening to you, and it's not a good place to be in. Avoidance. Some of us avoid situations or tasks that trigger our feelings of imposter syndrome. For example, a person who feels like a fraud in their job may avoid taking on new responsibilities or challenges altogether. You see this in the people who come to work with their head down, or the person that you know that always has really great ideas, but they never go and voice them, or they never take on that new opportunity. They never apply for the new role or to join the committee or be a part of a project. Sometimes those people are avoiding because the fear of failing is just too overwhelming. Halcyon says, I excel at avoidance. Another one is discounting. Some people discount their achievements and they minimize their success. They believe that they were only successful due to luck or external factors. So you remember my story about becoming a supervisor. I just knew in my heart that I was only in that position of acting out of convenience and timing. I completely discounted all of the work that I did to get there. I took a test. It was a very strenuous test. It involved a written test that rivaled some of my college exams. I had a practical exam that was really stressful. Employee a supervisor subordinate conflict type of conversation that was acted out in a room full of people recording me. It was a lot. And I had a management review in front of people that I didn't know, who didn't really know me. And they had to, rate me. And I got 100% on that. I discounted all of that in the face of getting this acting supervisor position. And I told myself, no, they just need someone and I'm available, because that was easier than dealing with my thoughts that I wasn't good enough for this role. Seeking validation is another one. Anyone have that friend or colleague that is constantly telling you, or someone else, that good stuff that they're doing? And oftentimes it sounds pretentious or like they're bragging. I know it's none of you guys, but you might have that person in your life. And while some of those people are actually obnoxiously bragging, a good majority of them are likely seeking external validation and approval from others to help manage their feelings of imposter syndrome. But it's not sustainable. Positive feedback can be very helpful, but when you rely on too much of that external validation, it may not address the underlying issues that are causing those feelings, the imposter syndrome. And what happens when the validation stops coming? What happens when people avoid you because they don't want to hear how great you are anymore, and you're no longer getting that external validation? What can happen is you begin to spiral. You begin to succumb to your feelings of imposter syndrome. Then you start to avoid, or you start to overwork yourself. All of these things turn into like a domino effect. And then the last one I want to talk about is perfectionism. Oh, perfectionism. I don't know about you, but this one is personal for me. I struggle with it daily, to be honest. My mind tells me that I cannot afford to make a mistake at work, because the moment that I do, the jig is up. Everyone is going to know that I'm not supposed to be here, and they're going to fire me. Now, does that prevent me from making mistakes? Absolutely not. So what does it do for me? It definitely allows me to operate at a high achieving level at all times, but it also leads to burnout and crippling anxiety. And quite frankly, it is not a sustainable way to live. I'm supposed to be on vacation today, and I actually start my vacation this evening, and I'm going out of the country. And I have been telling myself for the last 72 hours, Andrea, you have to stop looking at your email. You have to stop looking at your email. My boss, I don't know if he's here or not, but my boss, Brett, I sent a message in Slack this morning, and he's like, why are you here? But for me, it's because I can't afford to miss anything. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want anything to slip through the cracks. But the burnout that comes from that is so real that I have to find ways to let it go. And you do too, if you're in the same boat. It's not sustainable. Let's look at the chat really quick. You guys are talking a lot in there. Christine, I knew it was you. But let's see. Just last night, Erin says, just last night I was researching functional freeze. In some ways, I think these are connected. Imposter syndrome is exhausting because we all likely do all of these examples. Thank you for that, Erin. I'm going to research functional freeze. Jenna says, yes, I have someone that became a supervisor at the same time that I did, and I struggle with feeling like I'm not doing as well as she is, and she is doing more. I spiraled. Oh, that's a real feeling. It's real. Halcyon says, recovering perfectionist, aspiring good enough is. That's a Brene Brown quote. Thank you for that. Ashley, we are the same. All right. Thank you guys for engaging in the chat. It's so important to have these conversations and unearth the thing. It's like the secret thing that nobody talks about, but we need to talk about it and talk about it with each other. Okay, so if you found that you resonate with any of those coping mechanisms that we just went over, then you likely fit into one or more of the 5 different categories or competence types that Dr. Young identified that relate to imposter syndrome. So these types are based on the different ways that people experience imposter syndrome, and they can help you to understand better and address your feelings of fraudulence. We're going to go over them. And while we do, I want you to take note of which type you most strongly align with. And don't feel any kind of way if you align with more than one of them. So we are going to go into them now and throw in the chat when you find your tribe. The first one is the perfectionist imposter. So going right into my favorite one again. The perfectionist feels the need to do everything perfectly and hold themselves to incredibly high standards. And it often leads to overworking and burnout, like we've talked about. The perfectionist has a hard time delegating tasks or accepting help. They feel like they're the only ones who can do things right. And they tend to focus on their minor mistakes or flaws in their work, even if they've received positive feedback or they've achieved success or, they've achieved praise for their work. They have a hard time accepting that praise or any compliments because they feel like they haven't truly earned it. And they may struggle with procrastination. I am a master procrastinator. I tell myself I work the best under pressure, but really I've just been avoiding the task because I don't want to fail. So they procrastinate, they avoid because they fear that they won't be able to achieve that perfection. And they often tie their self-worth to their achievements, and they feel like failures if they don't meet their own high standards. Like I told you guys in the beginning, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm trying to break free from the reins of perfectionism because it's very toxic. It is not healthy for you. So as we go through these competence types, I want you to look at the new competence rules. These are the things to help you change your mindset. Kind of like affirmations, you start to tell yourself these things, and it helps you and arms you with like tools to push back against the feelings of imposter syndrome. So if you are the perfectionist, you fall into this competence type, here are some rules for you to try to replace your perfectionist views. Tell yourself that perfectionism inhibits success. And sometimes good is good enough. I know that that's going to short circuit some people's brains. And especially this next one as well. Not everything deserves 100%. Again, I know that is just not going to compute for some people, but you have to tell yourself that because it's true. If everything is a priority, what really is the priority? But as perfectionists, we want everything to have 100%, and it's not sustainable. You have to remember that your perfectionism impacts others. Throw in the chat ways that you think perfectionism can impact others. I'll tell you a couple of ways myself. When you have set this level of perfection as your bar, you begin to try and hold other people accountable to that level as well. And that's not fair to other people. And then also tell yourself that non-perfection is to be embraced. It's okay to not be perfect because honestly, none of us are and we never will be. So embrace that and understand that it's okay. Any perfectionists in here? Ooh, Jessica, we're going to talk about that. I started seeing the perfectionist really pronounced in my 9-year-old daughter. It impacts your children. It absolutely does. I am the child of perfectionist parents, and I see now how what they did and what their expectations were rubbed off on me. So yes. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I love pop culture. I love television, and I really love that imposter syndrome is being talked about in the media in pop culture. And so I watched a TV show that you guys may have heard of. It's called Station 19. It's a Grey's Anatomy spinoff, and it's in its last season. But there was an episode where the lieutenant, her name's Andy, her name's Andrea, like me, but they call her Andy. And she was, the chief approached her and asked her to be the acting captain of the station. And she told the chief, I don't want it unless it's permanent. And the chief told her, oh, Andy, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And it struck me because oftentimes as perfectionists, we are waiting for the absolute perfect moment. We're waiting for something to be perfect to take on that next step, to step into that next role. But sometimes, like we talked about just in the last slide, good can be good enough. And while you're waiting for perfect, you may allow good to pass you by. So keep that in mind. All right, so the next competence type is the natural genius. So the natural genius is characterized by the belief that abilities and skills should come easily and without effort. They set very high expectations for themselves. They struggle with tasks that don't come easily to them, and they avoid challenges or situations where they may not excel immediately for fear of being exposed as fraud. The natural genius stays in their square of comfort. They stay in their comfort zone. If it's outside of what innately comes natural to them, it's too uncomfortable. And the thought of stepping into something that's that uncomfortable brings about the thought of failure. So they don't do it. Some other traits include the tendency to judge themselves very harshly for mistakes and failures, and the fear of not living up to their potential. They also have a tendency to rely only on their natural abilities rather than learning or developing new skills. Because again, if it's something that doesn't come super easy, they want no parts of it. And then they feel anxiety or inadequacy when they encounter tasks or situations that are outside of those natural abilities. So if you are the natural genius, you need to think about some new competence rules. You need to tell yourself things like effort is necessary for success and challenges are opportunities for growth. You're not going to grow if you don't take on new challenges. You can stay firmly planted in your comfort zone and you'll probably have an okay quality of life at work or at home or in your social circles. But in order to really grow, you've got to step outside of that comfort zone. You've got to step into that 4% of people that actually push past that barrier. And what's on the other side of that comfort zone, you have to remember, is new opportunity. It's new success. It's the opportunity to impact people and grow from where you currently are, the opportunity to expand yourself. And it's just right on the other side of that comfort zone. And it may not feel comfortable because it doesn't naturally come to you, but you can do it. You can push past it. You have to tell yourself that mistakes and failures are part of the learning process and that learning and development are ongoing processes. You'll never stop learning. And it's okay to ask for help or seek guidance. So if you're the natural genius, step outside of your comfort zone, tell yourself your new competence rules, and step into that next level of success. So there's a question. How many of you don't use your notebooks or pens because you're waiting for the perfect setting to use them? I am very guilty. I don't know that I've used any of these pens, so I'm just going to set them right back there in the corner. And Susie, Smiley, yes, the slideshow, I will make sure to get to Halcyon. Maybe they can distribute that to the attendees. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, so again, pop culture, embracing imposter syndrome, talking about it so people don't feel alone. I think it's so important. And so this is another show that I like called Chicago Fire. And I saw this episode actually as I was developing this course, and I'm like, man, someone is talking to me right now. So I want to share this with you. Hold on one second.
Sit. You ever heard of imposter syndrome? It's when you're afraid that everyone is going to find out that you're a fraud when, in fact, you are not.
What's it called when you really are?
Your job is not to be Severide. Your job is to be yourself. This is what Kelly texted me when he heard that Bowden was keeping you on as acting lieutenant. That's great. Joe is the best man for that job. Not just smart and competent, but tough as they come. So, you tell me. Does he have it wrong? Is Kelly Severide a poor judge of character? I had plenty of self-doubt when I became lieutenant too. So I speak from experience when I say, don't second guess yourself, Cruz. Because nobody else second guesses you.
Yeah, I don't think.
So I love that quote. Don't second guess yourself because nobody else second guesses you. It's something that I actually had to write down when I watched the episode, and I put it on my little sticky note affirmation wall behind my desk. And I read it to myself often because I have to remember, and I want you all to remember as well, when you are part of an organization and your leader sets a vision, or if you are the leader and you set the vision, a leader who sets a vision is now looking for the pieces to carry out that vision and that mission. And if your leader thinks of you enough to be part of that mission, to be one of those pieces, they're not second guessing you. So when they put you up for a new opportunity, when they ask you to work on a project, or when they invite you to the table to give your input on something, they're not second guessing you. So stop second guessing yourself. Take on that new challenge, take on that new opportunity. Because your leader, they have that vision and they want you to be part of it. So remember those things. Okay, so we're talking about competence types, and this is the next one, the superhuman. And if there are dispatchers in here, which I'm sure there are most of you, this is probably you. So the superhuman is characterized by individuals who feel the need to excel in all areas of their life, including work, family, social activities. They struggle to delegate tasks or ask for any help because they fear being perceived as weak or incompetent. They often experience high levels of stress and burnout as a result of trying to maintain their high levels of performance. Who in here is the person, when made part of a group project, takes on all the tasks and doesn't let anyone else do anything? Just go ahead and out yourselves in the chat. Sorry, I'm just gonna call you guys out here. That is a superhuman, because you feel like you have to excel in all of these areas. But what you have to remember is it's honestly not possible. So instead of stressing yourself out because your mind is telling you that you have to be superhuman, reframe your thoughts. Tell yourself that it's okay to say no. Dr. Michelle Lilly is one of my faves, and she said on a webinar once, no is a complete sentence. And it is also on my sticky notes behind here, because it was my mantra all of 2023. No is a complete sentence. You can say no. Also remember that delegating frees you and it gives others the chance to participate. Group leaders, you have to let other people learn and grow. You have to know that slowing down and cutting out tasks allows you to focus on activities that really matter. Like we talked about with the perfectionists, which superhumans are also perfectionists. Not everything deserves 100%. Not everything deserves 100%. And sometimes good is good enough. You also have to remember and tell yourself, we talked about it already in the chat, being a superhuman sends an unhealthy message to your children. It tells them that they also have to be superhuman perfectionists. It sets a bar that is impossible to achieve. So remind yourself that. For my friends in the chat who are like, I see it manifesting in my kid, that's gonna continue, and it's gonna continue with them through their adolescence and into adulthood. And you're going to create superhuman children that become superhuman adults, and it's not sustainable. Also, stop apologizing for a messy house. Y'all know that person who they volunteer to drive to lunch, and you get in their car and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry for the mess. And you look around and you're like, girl, what? You don't want to see my car. Stop apologizing for it. You're allowed to have mess in your car, in your house. You're allowed to say, I'm not doing the laundry today. You're allowed to do those things, and you don't have to apologize for them. I saw a comment, let's see, Chrisney, I apologize today for having unpacked things in my garage in a house I bought 6 months ago. I also apologize this weekend for having dishes in my sink when I had no hot water for 4 weeks. Stop that. You don't have to apologize, because no one is expecting superhuman out of you unless you set that expectation for people. So stop setting the expectation for other people that you are a superhuman. And remember that nobody excels at everything. Ashley says, I connect with this one the most so far. My husband tells me all the time, I don't know how to say no to someone. We have to learn how to say no. Saying no is setting a boundary and executing it at the same time. and no is a complete sentence. I find myself often saying no and then giving an explanation, or saying no and apologizing profusely. And I've really started when I'm, especially like an email, I'll say no and start typing my reason, and I just delete it and say, no, sorry, I can't do that right now. No, sorry, I don't have the bandwidth for that right now, and leave it at that. All right, superhumans, remember, it's okay to say no. The next competence type is the expert, and we're almost done with these. But the expert imposter believes that they need to know everything before they can begin a task or a project. They have a constant fear of being exposed as a fraud if they don't know the answer to a question they encounter, or a problem they can't solve. And as a result, they avoid taking on new challenges or projects. They feel overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that they think they need to acquire. So when I was putting this class together, I was practicing it in front of my husband, and I got to this slide, and I was like, oh my God, it's you. He is the expert. Because let me tell you what happens in my house. We got a set of shelves and from like IKEA, and it was like a Friday, and I'm like, okay, hey, so you'll put these together this weekend, so like by Sunday I can start decorating my new shelves. And he's like, yeah, no problem. And so then what takes place is he reads the instruction, he unboxes everything, he puts all the labels in the right order, he reads the instructions, then he goes to YouTube University and watches a YouTube video to try and understand it. Then he goes to TikTok University and watches a TikTok on it to understand it faster, I guess. And then he goes back to the website to read the reviews, and he finds a couple more YouTube videos. Then he goes to my dad's house and borrows tools that he thinks he needs and doesn't already have. And come Sunday, I don't have shelves because this man feels like he has to absorb all of the knowledge before he can begin a task. And honestly, sometimes you just have to start. You just have to start. You have to say, okay, I've gathered my resources and I'm gonna start the project. So if you are the expert, your new competence rules are, there are many paths to expertise. You don't have to know them all. And you need to know that there is no end to knowledge. You will always continue to learn. Know that competence also means respecting your limitations. So sometimes the expert thinks that if they don't know something, they can just go learn it and then do it. No, if you did not go to tax school, you cannot just say, hey, I'm gonna do my neighbor's business taxes. It's not because I read a book. It's not that simple. And also, you don't need to know everything. You just need to be smart enough to find someone who does. And even when you don't know something, you can still project confidence. So remember, you just have to start. My experts, just start. The last one that we're going to cover, and we're almost out of time, so we're going to fly through this one, is the soloist. This is also a lot of dispatchers. This imposter believes that asking for help or support is a sign of weakness, and that they need to accomplish everything on their own to prove their competence. They may feel like they have to do everything themselves and that they can't rely on others, even when it's appropriate to seek help or collaborate. So if you are the soloist, you have to tell yourself things like, to get the job done, you first need to identify the resources that are required. And competent people know how to ask for what they need. Sometimes it's other people. Also, smart people seek out people who know more than they do. And remember that when seeking advice, it's important to ask the right people. So as you are carrying out this mission of, I'm not going to be the soloist, I'm going to ask for help, I'm going to seek out people that are resources, don't go ask another soloist, because they're also not doing the things that they should be doing to get the right answers. Find the right people to help you navigate something. I know this is one that Melanie Smith says, how bad is it when you identify as all the competence types? We all have a little bit of all of this in us, right? So just remember, if you are the soloist, these are my group project leaders as well, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to cover, and then Halcyon, I'm going to hit it back over to you, is these consequences of success that people tell themselves. These are self-sabotaging scenarios that people tell themselves in order to avoid failure or to avoid looking like a fraud. So there are some here, And like I said, I will send this presentation out. I also have a worksheet that I'll send for you guys as well. So if you want to go back through it with the worksheet, you can. But what I want you to do is when you look at these, I want you to reframe these consequences of success that we tell ourselves as a positive affirmation of success. So for example, if it was, if I succeed, it means someone else fails. I would reframe that affirmatively as there's room for all of us at the top. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So as you go through these self-sabotaging scenarios that we put in our own mind, I want you to start reframing them affirmatively so that they are no longer self-sabotaging and they are affirmations that help you step out into your success. And that's it. I hope that everyone is feeling affirmed. I hope that you learned something about yourself in this session. I hope what you learned is that you can be great. You can own your hard-earned and well-deserved success. You don't have to live in fear of failure or in fear of succeeding. And you can do the things that you've been putting off. You can take the promotional exam. It doesn't matter if you've only just crossed the tenure threshold and people assume you don't know enough. Just like it doesn't matter if you're the senior person and you think you've passed your time, past your prime, apply to speak at a conference. It doesn't matter if it's your first time, you have to start somewhere. You have to believe in yourself, be your own champion, and watch how high that you can soar. So with that, thank you guys so much. This is the first time I've kind of unveiled to the world that outside of my 9 to 5, I am also Andrea King Smith, LLC. And you can connect with me on my website or through my email. I would love to talk more about this conversation, and please connect on LinkedIn with me as well.
So good. So good. Some of you may have noticed I put in the chat the link so you can grab a certificate for this webinar. We do upload all our webinars, ECC Essentials, to our YouTube account. So be sure to go over there and subscribe. And so this one will be up there hopefully soon in the next couple of days, beginning of next week. And as always, you can email me if you run into any issues with the certificate. Thank you all for being here. Just a reminder, Be the Difference 2025 early bird registration is open now. Also through that link in the chat as well, if you want to check that out. We'll be back next month with our next webinar Wednesday, so be sure to follow us on social media as well as join our email list. You can go to our website to do that if you're not already on it, to keep up to date with all the free virtual events that the foundation is working on. Thank you again, Andrea. I have gotten to watch Andrea from her first webinar to now, from being in the center to being on the private sector. And it is truly my honor to get to watch her journey and how far she's come. And when she tells you that you can go far and giving you the steps and the help, it's because she's learned it firsthand. And so definitely trustworthy advice. So thank you again. Thank you to everybody who watched. We will be back next month, and enjoy the rest of your dispatch week. And thank you for all your work.
Thank you, guys.